Well, good morning. My name is Rachel Frost. I am with Montana State University, and I am the director of the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program. I'd like to also introduce my co-authors on this project, Kendall Cross, who is the owner and director of Red River Ag Consulting, and also Mr. Dan Leahy, who is the founder and director of the Foundation for Ranch Management. With that, we'll dive right into the topic of our presentation, which is getting beyond no one wants to work. So agriculture has always been a risky business. There is challenges around every corner with markets, weather, livestock health. But the challenge that everyone is talking about right now is labor, or more specifically, the lack thereof. Foreign labor and the H-2A program is keeping many of our American farms and ranches in business, but it's still not able to keep up with the need for ag labor. Is there anything that we can do to help bridge this gap? And is there anything specifically that we can do within the borders of our country and looking at our future workforce to help us all get beyond that blanket statement of no one wants to work? So, what are the consequences of a less than adequate workforce? And by adequate, I mean numbers, volume, as well as skill. The stakes truly are high because, quite honestly, the future of ranching hinges on our willingness to attract, retain, and grow our workforce of both laborers and managers. The lack of skilled, accessible laborers is probably the number one reason that keeps ranches from reaching their potential. And by potential, I mean that this is limiting the adoption of money saving and more effective management techniques that can really improve a ranch's bottom line. It also is a leading cause of owner frustration or fatigue, and also one of the things that contributes to the rising crisis that we're seeing in mental health among our agriculture community. That owner frustration, that fatigue, that can lead to sales of ranches and perhaps to non-agricultural use. There's also a tremendous real cost in replacing a bad hire and the time that you spend seeking new employees. I think that's probably one of the things that managers dread the most is trying to replace a good employee and running the risk of bringing a bad employee onto that operation and all of the negative consequences that can go along with that. And then finally, there can be an increased time horizon for conservation to be realized on the property because you're losing skill. You're spending time having to train new employees, and all of that prevents you from doing the one thing that you really need to do when you're running a ranch, and that is becoming a more efficient operation that is constantly improving the landscape that makes you a living and that you call home. So why am I here today? Why are we having a presentation about this issue? Because most of the presentations on this issue focus on one thing. They focus on showing the statistics of labor and what's happening, and you walk away with just a negative picture of the future of our labor industry. So I'm not here today to just dwell on that side. We've acknowledged it. We know that there is a problem, but now we want to look ahead and see what can we do to solve this problem. I'm also not here to either promote or disparage foreign workers in the H-2A program. They're a valuable asset and piece of this puzzle, and they also have become really truly skilled workers and trusted friends for most of the people who have utilized those programs. What I am here today to do is to encourage everyone to act within their current role and their circle of influence. What do you do on a daily basis? Who do you interact with? What is your circle of influence in which you can make a difference in this ag labor? And we'll talk about those ways and the actions specifically that you could take depending on where within this industry that you fall currently. Because this truly is everyone's problem for all the reasons that have been stated in the lead up to this. And so, what lies within each of your power to help provide one brick in that paved road to a solution? And then, once you've identified your role and responsibility, do you have the resources and the knowledge and the training that actually take action, to do something, to change the way you're doing business. And where can you find that help? We'll show you some resources that you can turn to within your role to do that better and to provide just to perform that role in a more sustainable way. And then combined with that, we want to present a model for addressing the ag labor problem that helps each one of us do a better job within that part. So let's take a look at what I'm calling the ag labor problem a little more closely. So everyone agrees that ag labor is a huge problem, but we would contend that it's a wicked problem. So the term wicked problem is rooted in systems analysis, and it was introduced by Horst Riddle and Melvin Weber back in 1973, and it was used to define complex social and policy issues that don't have a clear solution and that often address things that are difficult to solve because they're of an interconnected nature and people have conflicting perspectives. So in this sense, wicked really refers to a resistance to a resolution rather than to any malicious intent on anybody who's involved within that problem. The bigger problem is that no one really agrees to the definition of the problem. We all agree we're in a labor crisis, but what does that actually mean? Um, does it mean that no one wants to work? Does it mean that we have a broken immigration policy? Does it mean that wages cannot compete with other industries? Or do we have a problem because of the long hours and the harsh working conditions in agriculture? All of these can be seen as a root cause or definition of the problem. And so a failure to light on what truly is the underlying driving issue could lead us to providing the right answer to the wrong question, which doesn't solve anything. So because of the aforementioned characteristics, we must approach wicked problems differently. We cannot simply be solution focused. Our instinct is always to avoid overcomplicating the issue, and we want to solve the problem on our ranch for our labor needs right now in whatever way we can. But if we just focus on the solution within our immediate context and fail to look at the different perspectives and the larger societal issues that could be caused by that, we might be causing other problems later on. Our solution might actually result in other problems later on. So let's look at this ag labor issue in a way that helps us to provide some solutions because we have to solve our immediate problem, but we also need to look at that issue as a whole and not necessarily as the individual parts so that we're not placing blame on somebody else for things and we're actually looking at how our solutions contribute to the whole process. So the goal then is to treat the underlying problem, not just to treat the symptoms. And the steps that we need to take first are to consider a problem as part of a larger interconnected system. And we need to pay attention to how those parts are connected and the relationship between the parts. For the most part, that leaves out policy for us, for most of us in this room. We're dealing with as producers, as university or agency workers, as students, as employees. We are not necessarily within that policy. That's just our circle of concern. We certainly are interested in what's happening there, but that's not something that we can influence directly. So let's break down the parts of the ag labor that would be within the circle of influence for most of us in this room. And that is the training programs, the universities that are producing our future workers. True, not all employees in agriculture need to come through a university program, but there's definitely a role for that in there. So what are we doing? What are the students, the graduates that we are producing, and how are they contributing to the future of agricultural labor? Next, that employee, perhaps that graduate from a university, perhaps it's someone who's just come through the School of Hard Knocks or has come through another training program. What is that employee's role in trying to make a place for themselves within this ag industry, finding the right conditions that they're comfortable in working in? And then the other part is the industry itself, the bosses within that industry, the mentors within that industry. And how are all of these connected? Are our universities and our training programs communicating with the industry and the bosses and the mentors to understand what they're truly looking for in future employees? Are our employees communicating with the industry? Are they communicating back with our university and training programs and helping them understand how they're not prepared after coming through those programs to be truly effective employees? So recognizing that each one of these pieces is interconnected and should be communicating is the first part of trying to provide some steps, some action items that we can do to address this labor issue. And we need to do all of this together. We need to not focus on one single part of this connection of the labor issue. It is not enough that universities just start training better graduates if they're not jobs waiting for these graduates. It's not enough for the employee to bring integrity and skill to the workplace if the industry lacks the structure and the leadership it takes to support that employee on their journey. It's not enough for the industry to start creating more opportunity and structure for those employees if there are no skilled employees looking for jobs. So what we need is a partnership. We need an intentional exchange between industry employees and for those that are preparing for the future so that we can start to provide a more meaningful solution to address ag labor. So let's start with the university's responsibility that they have and what are some steps that they can do. Ultimately, if you look at the purpose of a university, it is to prepare students to work. We want to provide them with academic knowledge, but really, we're preparing students to enter a workforce with the skill that they need to do so successfully. The places to universities really need to start now is with who are our students. Particularly within our colleges of agriculture, we're seeing a vast change in who our students are, where they're coming from, and what experiences they're bringing with them that are shaping their education even before they start taking those classes. So the majority of our students right now are coming from urban backgrounds. Here at Montana State University, 61% of our students are identifying as coming from a metro background. Most of these students also will readily admit that they have no experience in agriculture. Perhaps they rode a horse one time. Perhaps their friend's grandfather had a farm and they went out to that and they were able to spend some time outside with animals. And that is really what's driving them. The other thing that we see, though, despite the fact that they're growing up in an urban background and that they have no experience with agriculture, is that there truly is a hunger for these students to connect with the land. There is a hunger for them to do physical labor. There's a hunger for them to connect with connect with the environment, connect with animals, connect with where their food comes from. So recognizing who these students are, understanding how they differ from our traditional College of Ag students is the first step that we need to take as a university to understand our part in helping to develop a future labor force to support our agriculture industry. The place that is most obvious to begin at the universities is with teaching. Because our students do not come with that innate experience, we need to explore more leveling courses and more career classes. I can't tell you the number of freshmen that come to me as an advisor and say they're going to be one of two things. They're either going to own their own ranch or they're going to be a large animal veterinarian, because those are the two maybe most prominently known career paths that they think will lead them to that life of working with animals and potentially being outside. However, both of those career paths are genuinely inaccessible to the majority of our students. They just don't have the capital outlay or perhaps even the grade point average to get into veterinary school. And so helping students to understand what are other ways that I can plug into this industry and still find that fulfillment and still be connected to the environment, to animals, to where my food comes from, etc., is part of our job as a university. We also need to embrace more experiential and applied learning. These students are hungry to get their hands on, animals, to do things, within our natural resource management, plants, animals, soils. All of that is incredibly important to them. So, not forsaking labs, getting students out into the landscapes, helping, connecting them with the producers who are doing the work on the ground is incredibly important. And they want very applied assignments. They want assignments that relate directly to the ranch that they visited last week on the field trip. And we definitely need that. We need them to have the context, not just the academic knowledge, for them to be effectively be able to move into agriculture as a career. We also have to focus on comprehension versus memorization. We've seen students coming out of these agricultural programs that have a solid knowledge and definitions, and of an academic knowledge of things, but they don't really understand how to use that knowledge when it comes to the more complex world of making decisions out in real life agriculture, where it's not just about animal health, it's also about the rangeland health, it's also about the economic bottom line of the operation. So helping them understand more about how do we comprehend the complex systems that are agricultural industries, and not just looking at things divided up into, is this a nutrition issue? Is this a grazing management issue? Because it's all so interconnected. Along with that is coming management development programs that help students look at these operations as a system, understand that complexity, and begin to make decisions by weighing those complex issues together instead of individually. So, what specifically is Montana State University doing, in particular the Downscott Ranch Management Program? Well, this is a new, unique program at MSU. I say new, it's been 5 years in the works, but it feels like we just got started. But one of the key components to this program, aside from combining multiple levels of academic interests, the curriculum focuses almost equally on livestock production, rangeland ecology and management, and then also business and finance. We take those three pillars of academia and we combine those with that experiential component that I was just describing of 2 summer-long internships on a working ranch. A lot of universities use internships as a key component of their education, but if those internships are not structured, we're not really sure what the student is walking away from it. So we have structured these 2 summer-long internships on the same ranch to accomplish specific goals. We structure the learning objectives specific to that student. We tailor them to what do they already know, what experience are they bringing from their past jobs and academic, and then where do they want to be in the future. We we really focus on being feedback intensive. We want the ranch to provide feedback to the student. I, as the advisor and the instructor, provide feedback to the student's performance as well. The ranch and I are in constant communication about the areas in which the student needs to grow as well. And so, because we're all three working together to the same end, we are pushing that student in ways that just the ranch itself or just myself as an instructor is unable to accomplish. We also do another unique thing at Montana State, and that is that we are very intentionally partnering with our career counseling services. We do this in a number of different ways. We're using interest assessments and strengths assessments to help prepare that student before they walk into those internships so that they understand what they're bringing to that situation. It increases their confidence, but it also demonstrates to them where they need to express humility and where they really need to be open to learning and understanding how they can use feedback to strengthen those skills very intentionally. We put the focus more on the development of that student's character and the development of that student's ability to learn it by reflecting on the situational learning that they've done and their situational awareness rather than getting a specific grade in a class. We also work on the soft skills of that student because, so much of agriculture is focused on your hard skills. Can you ride? Can you rope? Um, do you understand plant identification? All of those things, but really it is a people business and it's being able to communicate your needs and desires to your supervisor and vice versa so that you can both accomplish the goals of the operation that you're working on. The other thing that is truly a university's responsibility is to recognize that we are a gateway for new talent. No, not all agriculture workers need to be or are educated through a university system. But the reality is that students who don't know how to get into that industry usually turn to the university as their gateway to getting access to the industry. So recognizing that we're a gateway for new talent, recognizing that students who have a passion for this industry and don't have a clear path forward are coming to the university, how do we embrace them? How do we help them understand and make the connections within that industry so that they can become part of that new workforce that helps us with this labor issue? So now that we've graduated that student, what is their responsibility? And I say now that we've graduated, but really these responsibilities began all the way through that student's time at the university. And understanding that, knowing that we are preparing that student for a lifetime of learning, we just look at that student and their responsibility as an employee, just a continuation of the seeds that we have sown during their time at the university. So that student needs to be able to define what success means to them. Does that mean a certain paycheck? Does that mean a certain lifestyle? Does that mean living in a certain area? That student needs to be very, very clear on what it is that is important to them and what is driving them towards a certain career so that they can be matched up to a job that truly meets those things that are of priority to them. They need to be able to cultivate that growth mindset. We start planting the seeds for a growth mindset as the university, particularly within those internship experiences. But it is up to that student, once they're out of that influence, to find another mentor that will help to continue to cultivate, fertilize, and nurture that growth mindset, all the time focusing on their attitude. The attitude is the key component that they're going to be bringing that's going to help them to cultivate that mindset, that's going to help them to seek that feedback effectively. But these are all really hard. This is an intentional journey, and it's one that's best approached in a partnership with someone else, someone whose outside perspective can help to hold this student accountable. And sometimes it takes that outside perspective to help you be able to truly see yourself and what you bring to the table. That's where it's important to perhaps, if you don't have that direct mentor at a job, or even that mentor at the job is incredibly important, but to be able, once you've defined what success means to you, can you find someone that can help you intentionally chart that pathway to success? And that pathway might be through multiple different job opportunities. Each one of those, you're picking up pieces to the puzzle that help make you into the person that's going to be qualified for the job you eventually want to have. But it's critical to be able to partner with someone like the Foundation for Ranch Management, like Mr. Dan Leahy, who can help you sit there and understand, what do you have right now? What are you bringing to the table? And what do you need to improve to get to that job you ultimately want to have? And how do you start to chart a pathway that can lead you through the steps to get there? And one of the most important components of that is seeking and incorporating effective feedback within there. So having that third party person could be the essential piece that helps this person as an employee really fulfill their role in that whole systems approach to trying to solve some of those labor issues. And then finally, the industry itself. What is the industry's responsibility? Ultimately, it's to be a place where people want to work within the labor issue for sure. And that means that as an industry, we need to become better bosses. The truth is that most people who got into farming or ranching, they did it because they loved animals, because they loved the land itself, because they loved the lifestyle and living rural and working with their hands. And those are the things that brought them reward, not necessarily working with people, not necessarily honing their soft skills, their communication skills. But as an industry, we do have to realize that we are people centric and that without people to help us with those labor issues, then we really are not able to fully accomplish the goals that drive us as well. And so how do we work to become better bosses? How do we understand what motivates our employees? Compensation is a lot more than money. And in fact, most employees are not motivated by the same things that their managers think that they're motivated by. The King Ranch Institute demonstrated this through some research that they performed a number of years back. And so understanding what truly motivates those employees, and that gets back to that student's ability to define what success is and also be able to communicate that success to their managers so that they're both on the same pathway to fulfillment, getting what they need out of them as a laborer, but also helping them fulfill their goals of what they want to be eventually as an employee. And maybe that's embracing a more flexible management style. We know there's long, long hours that can be in agriculture. Usually those are for seasons. So then can we take some of those off times and embrace more short days and family focus within that as well? How does that industry take those steps to become those better bosses, to become that place where people want to work? Well, fortunately, there are people to help you along that process. Kendall Cross with Red River Ag Consulting is one firm that is out there specifically focusing on helping ranches create that structure for employee success. She will begin by helping you hire the right people. What all goes into writing a job announcement? How do you conduct an effective interview? How do you really recognize character so that you can hire for character and train for the skills that you need? All of the things that make that a much more productive and longer lasting employee relationship. The onboarding process, providing distinctive opportunities for advancement and training. These are things that generally provide more fulfillment to our current workforce that's coming out of colleges and that is entering the workforce than necessarily wages alone, which is important because agriculture is a limited capital business. We don't necessarily have unlimited supplies to be able to compete with some of our more cash-rich competitors for labor. And then again, Kendall also works for both sides on giving and receiving effective feedback and the importance of strengthening those communication skills. So what does accepting responsibility look like? We've gone over 3 different sectors within the ag labor industry. What are some of the roles? What are ways that we can all rise to the occasion and do a better job? So it's important that those of us who are involved with universities or training programs, that we really think about intentionally how can we incorporate that experiential learning to prepare students for those real jobs in agriculture? How do they come out with more than just a diploma, but also coming out with the skills to make a place for themselves in the workforce, be able to communicate their needs and their desires effectively, and also be able to ask for help whenever they need it, and to intentionally begin to develop the skills that they know that they are lacking to become better employees there. What can you do as an instructor? What can I do as an instructor? What can we do programmatically to enhance the students that we are turning out into agriculture right now? An employee as a student, how do you take those steps to direct your future outcome? Define where you want to be, chart that pathway forward, find the resources and the help that you need, and the accountability to help you take those steps. In an industry, also finding those resources and help that you need to intentionally work to become better bosses and better mentors. Become the person that people want to work for. You won't be perfect, but you could certainly have a better reputation as a place that really is enjoyable to work, not because of the check that you write, but because of the experience and the involvement, the engagement that you're offering to your employees. So again, going back to the fact that we can't get there on our own. It's a journey, it's a process. There's a lot more to it than we can provide in 20 minutes. And that's why the three of us are working together. We're working together to develop a community that creates programs that will help at every step on this journey. We're constantly sharing across the segments. We're constantly providing feedback to each other about what we can do differently and what gaps that we identify within our communications and how do we address that in training program. So just want to refer back to what we're doing within the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program to provide future employees for our ranch industry. Um, what Dan is doing within the Foundation for Ranch Management to help those future employees chart that own pathway to success, and how Kindle can help the industry meet their potential to be future bosses and employees. And so with that, I will take any questions that you might have.